Hey guys, we're doing something different on today's episode. We have our first vendor guest on the show. We're thrilled to have Matt Engfer, CEO and co-founder of Cubby. Cubby is revolutionizing the self-storage industry with its modern facility management software designed to simplify growth and streamline operations for operators. Matt and his team's fresh approach is transforming what has often been considered an outdated industry standard, making significant waves across the sector. We'll explore Matt's journey and lessons learned from his previous life in industries such as retail, life insurance, and martech to see what self-storage can learn. We'll delve into how operators should think about revenue management and the future of the tech landscape in the space. Hey, Matt. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to be on the pod. I'm excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Did you know that you're our first official vendor / tech nerd on the pod?
I didn't put that together. I've been listening to the pod, but it didn't occur to me that was the case. What an honor.
Yeah, no, we're excited. We're excited to geek out. The whole idea for the episode, I definitely want to go to explore like some of your experiences outside the industry, but just to start off, as a quick intro and whatnot, can you just tell us and the audience a little bit about Cubby and I guess just the vision behind its development? And with so many other property management softwares out there, I guess can you go into what gaps did y'all see in the market that you thought, hey, this is why we need to build Cubby and right now is the time to do it?
Sure. I'll give you the quick version and then we can double click on anything that you guys want to hear more about. But basically, my whole career was in marketing software and then leasing software and asset management software for other verticals in real estate. And I got exposed to the self-storage industry as a renter. And I was doing it as something I needed to get done in order to complete a side hustle job that I was running. And the experience that I got, was just not sufficient to my needs. I knew it could be better because I had been in leasing and asset management technology across other verticals. I saw what it could be like. And I knew that's what I wasn't experiencing as a renter in self-storage. So that kind of was the first time the veil was lifted. I started going to trade shows and things like that and learning more about the ecosystem. And basically started talking to operators, started working at storage facilities, doing research. And there's a lot of different things that people were asking for and that they wanted to see more from their tech. But the main thing that I thought when I saw the ecosystem was that we have these definitions in self-storage, like facility management software, like website management software, like revenue management software, access control software. A lot of these things are, in my opinion, trying to achieve the job of managing your revenue. And a lot of them did only a piece of that, or they were tied in together in a way that was painful for the operator to maintain through these old school integrations and things like that. So my initial reaction was this vertical does not look like other industries from a technology perspective. There's categories that just don't exist anywhere else in the economy. And that is not really that original of an idea, but for somebody who's been in storage for a long time and has just come to kind of accept the ecosystem that's grown up around the industry, around people trying to solve their own problems, that's a little bit of a fresh take. So basically, the inspiration for Cubby was an end-to-end revenue machine for your self-storage operation. And there's a lot that goes into that, but that's kind of the short answer of what it is that kind of sparked where we started to build.
I'm going to pre-apologize that I sound like I swallowed a frog to everybody that's listening. I'm a little under the weather, but didn't want to miss Matt joining the pod today. It's interesting how simple it is of really what you said was you saw fragmentation across the ecosystem and you're we're going to help people make more money by doing this better. right? Like at the end of the day, like it's fragmentation, different tools, not communicating appropriately. I want to go back before self-storage, just give everybody kind of an idea. Like I think your background is an interesting background. You talk about some other asset classes and leasing, et cetera. Like where'd you come from prior to coming into the industry?
I grew up the son of two hotel lifers. My mom worked for Hyatt her entire career, literally only ever worked for Hyatt. I lived in a Hyatt for a year in California when I was a kid. Really good pool for like an 8-year-old kid. And then, so I kind of like the dinner table conversations, the word RevPAR, occupancy, length of stay, rate, these things were just second nature. So that's kind of the background.
Past the mac and cheese.
Yeah, past the mac and cheese. It's taco night. What's your daily rate? What's RevPAR? Those kinds of things. So conceptually, grew up around that, and then decided I didn't want to be in the hotel industry. But after school, I went to the University of Florida, and I got my master's at University of Florida, and was living in Argentina, basically completing my master's with some coursework down there, and got an internship at Turner Broadcasting Television, selling ads to American brands to display all over all the Turner Broadcasting networks in Latin America, CNN, TNT, Cartoon Network, stuff like that. And I was the young guy. So they said, there's this internet thing. We can sell some stuff along with our TV buys, and you can manage that. So that was kind of my first experience being thrown into the deep end. From a tech perspective, I had to figure out how to stand up landing pages and how to run a video contest on the internet when Facebook was just starting and that kind of thing. So that got me into marketing technology. I basically, a friend of mine, meanwhile, had started a startup that is now, or it was called Savored. And it was basically like an open table competitor, restaurants, booking software. And so my job was, I quit that first job and I wanted to, do something a little bit more entrepreneurial. So I launched the Miami market where I had moved for this startup as like a 24-year-old kid. And I was just running around selling booking software to restaurants in Miami. Very cool job. And
some interesting characters in the restaurant business down in the Miami region, I'm sure.
Totally. I mean, I had to go back into the kitchen and try to sign chefs on the spot. And that's a pretty high intensity environment, but it was really fun. And it taught me a lot about technology and how to run a technology company, how to acquire customers and those kinds of things. And I was helping with marketing on.
There's also nothing like better in like an early entrepreneur's like career than just like getting it done, right? Like going out there, being on the boots on the ground, shaking hands, and like just freaking trying to close the chefs in the back of kitchen, right?
It was great. It was an awesome job. It taught me a lot. Taught me how to sell. Taught me how to do some marketing, and we had it was a pretty wild ride. Like that company ended up selling to Groupon. And during that process, it was very clear that most of the employees were not going to stick around after the acquisition. So I got a job basically for one of the vendors that we were using to run our marketing campaigns, selling software to run email acquisition campaigns and things like that. And I moved to New York to work for that company. And that was like 13, 14 years ago. And from that moment on, I worked for them. I worked in venture funded startups selling marketing technology to every kind of brand under the sun, from life insurance companies to L'Oreal, and everything, kind of learning what corporate marketing departments looked like, how budgets were set, how customer acquisition really worked in some of these enterprises, and loved it. And I thought that's how the universe of software worked. And then I was recruited in about 10 years ago into a company that it is now known as VTS. And VTS was trying to apply modern marketing and workflow and sales software to the commercial real estate industry, specifically industrial, office, and retail owners. And I was an early employee there. I think I was like the 20th employee when I left to start Cubby 8 years later. It was 700 people or so. It was used in pretty much every Class A office, Class B office building in primary, secondary, and tertiary markets around the country, and even, Canada, India, all over Europe. It was a rocket ship for sure, and it was a lot of fun. I learned a ton over that time period. I did a bunch of different jobs there, managing, larger operators of like Shorenstein on the West Coast, some of the premier office assets in downtown San Francisco, or some of Blackstone's industrial holdings, and then mom and pop operators who were renting out contractor garages and tin sheds in the backyard, up and down the line, and just fell in love with the commercial real estate industry through that process. And I really kind of fell in love with the concept of being able to develop a real relationship with my customers that went right to the heart of the business and was really focused on helping them drive revenue. And I saw really what a dollar saved or a dollar earned in the real estate industry meant. Everybody knows what NOI is, and they know the value of that dollar is worth more than a dollar at the end of the day when they go to sell that asset. So telling an ROI story in real estate was, if you can get the meeting, if you can tell a compelling story and back it up with facts and outcomes that you can drive for that customer, it's a beautiful, beautiful market. So fell in love with it, and then did that for a long time. But it wasn't my company, right? I wanted to start my own thing. Started kind of this side hustle on the side where I was basically trying to lease art to commercial operators before COVID, trying to install cool art in their lobbies just so it wouldn't be so boring and gray all the time. And
dude, I just learned about this. I have a friend who owns a restaurant, and I was just talking to him this weekend, and they told me that one of their rooms, apparently the artist is claiming back all the art in that room because they found another exhibition and whatnot. So now he needs to scramble to figure out what needs to happen there. But I didn't know there was a business. I thought people just bought art and put it on their walls. So that was really interesting.
Yeah. It's not a great business, by the way. It's logistically intense. I was moving art around, and the insurance costs are high because if you even nick this stuff, it can be a big deal. But it was really fun, and it was just something to get moving in the right direction. And I got a project going in Denver, and I needed a place to put all the gear. Turns out there's boxes and dollies and all sorts of stuff. And I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I wasn't going to be able to do this project. So finally, I just started renting storage units. There was like 4 buildings that we had these projects in. So I was renting storage units close to them. And I needed unified billing across multiple facilities. I needed contractors to be able to get in there at early hours or weird hours on the weekends. It just wasn't going to work. It was a disaster. This is pre-COVID. You couldn't even really book a lot of these things online. So that really is what woke me up to how far behind some of the industry was from a technology perspective at that point. And I'm sure you guys, it's the same thing for you. Once you kind of see self-storage, you see it everywhere, right? And I got obsessed.
You literally can't drive without like being like, oh, it literally is on every other corner, which is awesome.
It was COVID hit right at that point, and luckily put that side hustle on pause. But my wife and I gave up our apartment in Brooklyn. We put our stuff in a CubeSmart, which is the first time I'd ever used storage as like a personal consumer, not a business renter. And then we drove across the country for like 8 months living out of Airbnbs and stuff. And for the first time, I was just counting the storage facilities on the freeway. It was pretty eye-opening.
It's awesome. It's always fun. Yeah, it's always fun for me to like hear an entrepreneur's like, origin story, for lack of a better term. I think there's like an entire podcast of just like origin stories and like how the dots connect to like figure out how you come to the thing that you were supposed to go build, right? Like you started with just listening to your parents talk about hotels. You did all this other stuff with art and working with commercial real estate. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, there's a need here that like all these things led me to this place to go solve. So I appreciate you diving in there.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I'm curious before we even move away from it. One, I need to know what you seem to be like a sales individual at heart. Like, what was your sales pitch to get that art up in like businesses or offices and whatnot? I'm just curious.
Well, this was there was an amenity war breaking out. Everybody needed yoga and coffee bars and on-demand laundry in order to battle for these leases, whether it was retail and creating kind of like a place where people wanted to hang out, or office buildings when you're trying to sign leases with Facebook or Pinterest or something. They're opening an office. You need to make a cool Google-esque environment.
Nice.
And this was kind of like my stab at one little piece of putting together that amenity package that I thought could be cool. And that was the pitch. It was like, we'll help you create a really great environment for your tenants, and it'll be interesting. And when you're touring, your brokers are touring folks through the building, they can talk about this program, and it'll really show how you're differentiated from your competition, basically.
Nice. Oh, well, today I learned Matt is multifaceted. He is a sales technologist and an interior designer slash art.
I didn't
collector.
do any.
I don't even know.
I had a partner who was helping with that stuff.
Okay.
But,
I was like, damn.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Matt, something else I wanted to circle back on too was your life in just working for insurance companies. It seems like there's potentially some similarities with self-storage as a kind of need-based type industry. I'm just curious if you've taken any learns from your previous life there into the company at Cubby and just your work at self-storage. If you can dive a little bit more into that.
Yeah. I was basically helping big insurance companies, life insurance and health insurance companies, among others, sign up customers. And the way that we did that was by gathering email addresses and delivering impressions, and then really focusing on these moments, these life events where we could surround those folks with a brand's content. And those life events, like if you're selling life insurance, if somebody's having their first kid, you got to strike while the iron is hot, because that's when people buy life insurance. For the first time in their life, they're like, what happens if I'm not here anymore? And there are signals that you can pick up on online or, in different places to find people that are going through that experience. There's famous stories about people buying prenatal vitamins, right, on Walmart or Amazon or something like that, or they're searching for it on Facebook. You can retarget those folks. So we were trying to like find these people in these very particular life moments and then construct a journey, starting with content, and then moving them through kind of down to a conversion funnel, a purchase event, or some sort of lead capture event where we could start to gather data, put together a customer profile for these folks, and then just basically retarget the hell out of them, and basically when they thought of life insurance, they thought of one of our customers' brands. So that's like a good example, and I never thought about it. I was like, they were one of 15 of my clients, and I thought, okay, this is interesting, but I'm going to go do some other cool stuff. And then I got to self-storage, and I was like, oh, there's some parallels here. What happens when mom goes into a nursing home, or you're getting divorced? All these things that we talk about, these signals of demand, there's definitely stuff out there where you can pick up on that kind of thing, and maybe get your storage facility in front of one of those folks. I think there's definitely, at the REITs and some of the larger marketing departments, people are focusing on those things, and they have initiatives going to build content around those events and serve people in those moments. But for the most part, I don't think people are there yet. Yeah.
I was about to say, it's an interesting balancing act, because I think, like, traditionally, what is it, the 3 or 4 Ds of self-storage, right? And most of them are pretty negative for the most part, and so, like, you're advertising to it. And then I think there's also like a lack of sophistication, right? I think the like golden story for this like retargeting is like the dad who gets the like kid and starts getting targeted for his daughter's like pregnancy that she hasn't even announced yet. And it's like, we don't have that kind of metadata like compiled in the industry to like really do that at a holistic scale. But I think we're going to get there at some point in time, right?
I mean, I would ask you guys, like, I think those previous marketing experiences that I had were, big time marketing teams with agencies and budgets and, 10, 20, 30, 40 people working on some of this stuff. Obviously, it's just a different game here in self-storage, but with tech and with AI and the stuff that you guys are working on, I would imagine that it'll become easier and more realistic to achieve in the near future.
Yeah, I think it's like low hanging fruit, right? Like we've had conversations with like data aggregators in general, even in the industry, like a Track IQ or something that's like, looking at population data around where you should purchase a facility. But you take that and you go, well, how do we now communicate different events that are happening around a locale, so that we can start to target for operators that are utilizing our technology in a different way, right? And it's not really around the 3 or 4 Ds. I don't know if there's 3 or 4 of them. Is there 4? I think it's 4. But it's really around like lifestyle stuff, right? Like how do you start to do that so it's not the negatives of self-storage, right? Like I always talk about, I mean, Matt, you just gave your example of the millennial reason that you started using self-storage is, taking 8 months to, cross the country on Airbnbs. Kyle has a very similar story with his RV life that, him and his wife lived for a while. I know Rodolfo and I have crossed state lines more times than we like to count anymore. But it's like, there is different population of people that you can start to go, oh, you know what? Mason's been in a place for 12 months. He's probably within like a 3 to 6 month time period of putting everything in storage and figuring out where he's going to go next. So I think there's data aggregators that are going to allow for us to target those types of people.
Yeah. I also think that sometimes when we talk about this stuff, there's a segment of the market that can roll their eyes. And I would say that, they're probably justified in doing so. If they're in a small town and like they know everybody in town and they got a good business and they're happy with it, awesome. Like, I want to invest with that person. But
I passed this self-storage facility on the way to my mom and dad's house. They live in the North Georgia mountains, and it's just beautiful. Like it's always full with RVs and like boats, and they've got just a really big sign with a phone number on it, and I doubt anyone calls that.
So they're also the ones that own like the facility like 5 or 10 miles away too, which is, I mean, such a fantastic business. Back to your point, Mason. It's death, divorce, dislocation, and downsizing. Which I feel like downsizing is the least negative, but still, it is very, very negative. I was listening to a podcast the other week with David Collins from StoreSpace. And I liked how he described kind of from his perspective, like from a marketing perspective, how to pitch the product and the model of a self-storage company, right? I think along the lines of like, hey, like we're not renting self-storage, right? The real benefit and product is allowing people to hold on to their emotional attachments for the privilege of getting a check or money. And so I thought that was an interesting spin to the negative, I guess, factor or life event. But yeah, no, I just thought pointing that out.
I think it's hard to like pinpoint just one storage customer. There's just so many unique sources of demand, and within each of those sources of demand, there's so many unique personas and different people renting for very different reasons and valuing different things. And the good news is that the business is just such a fundamentally sound business that like we can kind of get away with not focusing on that super top of funnel brand marketing stuff that other industries have to scratch and claw for.
It's why, like, we always go to the SSA demand study from like a year or two ago. It's like it's why being the first one to pick up the phone and like answer the question is so valuable in this space, right?
Yeah,
because it really is who's open, who's going to be there for me, and can I move in today because I like it's top of mind for me. And if you can win those things, you win.
Yeah, I heard a stat: 60% of renters rent from the first website that they go to if they rent online. And then, what we see in our data is if you call someone back within 2 minutes, you close minimum 50% of those leads. So it's pretty simple at the end of the day in that sense.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm curious to bring it back to like some technology trends and kind of tie some of your experience here. I think there's like, both Kyle and Rodolfo and myself, like we all have obviously different experiences outside of the self-storage industry. And I think we probably lean on some of those experiences because it gives us that outsider perspective where you're not like just stuck in the walled garden here. Like what things did you observe in your past lives that like you lean on day to day as you're in the weeds of building Cubby out?
That's a good question. For me, where my mind immediately goes is just the nuts and bolts of running a software company. And I think that this is where our industry lacks. Our industry really needs professional software companies that are well run. And the consequences of not having that is just a tax on your speed. And every day that something that you'd like to have is not there in your technology stack is a day that you're not fulfilling your potential as far as revenue or cost savings or whatever it might be that you're focused on is. I think just running a really efficient product delivery motion where you have talented people who understand how to design product, how to elicit what outcomes a customer is truly asking for, and then efficiently being able to turn that into reliable product that you don't have to rebuild every 6 months. Like that's really hard to do. And it takes years and years and years of experience to like really nail how to do it well.
And when you do it well, everybody thinks it's really easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have like, I want this feature. My friend built it in a weekend, right? And awesome. You can totally do that. But what your friend built in a weekend, is it going to last and be dependable for your business for the next 6 years? Probably not. A more thoughtful approach, tested and vetted with customers and real life use cases before it turns into something that you have to maintain for a long time. That kind of stuff, just delivering product with expertise is invaluable. So that's one of the things that I've just observed. I've observed as like a guy who kind of came up on the business side of the software industry. If I get too involved in the product and telling people what to do, and this feature needs to look like this, and we need a green button, not a blue button, it breeds bad habits. It breeds complacency and just bad things, and you end up with a crappy product if you do it that way. You have to let your people who know product build product. And if they're going to make a mistake, cool, let them make it. Because on the other end of that mistake is just a superior team that can move more quickly in the future, right? And that's kind of what one of the big things that I've kind of applied at Cubby is like, we want to be a product-led company that has great sales and support as part of the offering, but the product is so important, and the design is so important, and the reliability and performance are so important. You need professional expertise to kind of like drive that home every day. That's one thing I would say.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I mean, Kyle's never let me. He's never let me touch his sketch files because he'll tell me that I just have the make my logo bigger cream like ready to go.
That's what we call it.
The make my logo bigger cream. Is that what you said?
Like you take a little cream and you like rub it on there. I just wanted this logo to be a little bit bigger. Like, no, get out of here with that.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Basically, because like every entrepreneur will just be like, "Yeah, make my logo a little bit bigger. It's not too big. They need to know my logo in the top left corner."
It gets bigger with every version, and then now it's just taking over the whole screen.
Our designers completely they just removed any logo, or there's not the word Cubby anywhere in our software anymore. And I almost had a heart attack. I was like, "How are they going to know?"
Yeah.
See, you're proving the point. If we're gonna give Matt some make my logo bigger cream because he wants the logo somewhere, like, at least when you log in.
I know enough to bite my tongue. I've got better things to do.
Matt, I just wanted to touch on that. Like, I appreciate that you brought that up because us being in the self-storage industry, like we come from a background of like having done a lot of different software throughout the years. Even before this, we built a company and sold that before this as well. But like having spent a lot of time in the industry now, like there's a big difference between a self-storage company trying to like add software to their business and then a software company coming in to the self-storage industry, right? I think it's a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
And so I think what the industry needs though at the same time, right? We need more people that are like software people, product people coming in and figuring out how do we solve these problems, as opposed to like it's always maybe been like a financial problem or like just a pure sales problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what makes us a little bit different from some of our competition and things like that. And we tell people that all the time. But it's also a challenge. Like, we don't have the institutional years of experience that some of these operators who've gone out and started their own software, spun out their own products and things like that. So we have to do the work to get up to speed in order to make sure that we're building stuff that's useful and not just stuff that we think is cool.
I'm curious, like talking about product and everything, like even I'll pose it to just everyone. I feel like everyone touches the product at some point or the other, but are there any unexplored areas in that being where Cubby plays or even outside of Cubby in self-storage that you find interesting that, there might be potential?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of white space, and I expect it to all get explored by Cubby and many others. When I was at my previous company 10 years ago, real estate owners spent like 1/5 on tech compared to other industries of similar sizes. That's changed a lot. And what happened was you had an explosion of vendors solving all sorts of problems, some good, some bad. But they filled a lot of
stepping
holes.
on toes. I'm sure.
A lot of and it's net for the industry. It's great because now people have selection and they can solve problems that they couldn't solve before. But I think in self-storage specifically, I don't see a ton of tech addressing the cost side of the business. We're focused on the revenue side of the business, but you see some of it with like walkthroughs, or how to order supplies. If you have vans or moving trucks that you're offering, like, can you track those? I don't know. This is just one segment of the workflow that I see that I don't see a lot of tech addressing. You see some of it. most of it's horizontal tech that also sells to other verticals. So I think there's some opportunity there to help operators. I'm not sure that that's something we're going to focus on in the near future, but the other thing is like the buying and selling of these properties is largely the same today as it was 30 years ago. You got brokers putting together a deck, pulling some basic numbers out of a management summary report that was built in 98 and, hitting the phones. That's kind of changing in other asset classes, whether it be in finance or other commercial real estate asset classes. So I think that there's a ton of opportunity there. Along with that comes financing of these facilities. You see Extra Space doing a lot of mezzanine loans and, lending products. A lot of people are standing that kind of thing up. How can technology assist in that part of the business? But I think you see more of it happening in acquisitions, like with these data platforms like TractIQ you mentioned. Like, so it's coming along. What you guys are doing, is unique. So there's definitely room.
Yeah, it's an exciting time right now because I think you have a lot of different things. Like you have a couple of you have people that are trying to come in and build technology that's differentiated and unique and solve problems, and you see all these white space like opportunities to go and figure out like how you can do it. And then also the industry is moving towards like this remote, virtually managed kind of operation. So like the actual product itself is changing some. So it's just there's a lot of change happening, and that's exciting, I think, for entrepreneurs and people that like to solve problems in general.
Totally.
I want to kind of gear the conversation a little bit to some of your revenue management in general, and I think this is a good like segue. And we're talking about experimentation. We're talking about trying new things. Like maybe we can talk on like what kind of experiments do you see, or what kind of like opportunities do you see from a revenue management perspective, like today, maybe even a couple years from now, or whatnot.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I grew up in the hotel industry. A ton of our engineers used to build a pricing engine for the airline industry. And basically, I think there is and for background, Cubby is like basically at the end of the day, facility management software that has built-in e-commerce and revenue management capabilities and call center capabilities right under one roof, right? So you're asking about revenue management. How do people set rates? And when people ask about this, I think most of the time they're actually talking about two things that are tightly coupled, which is like how to set the right street rate to get a new renter into a vacant unit, and then how to manage my existing tenants' rates, and do I want to bump their rent periodically and by how much? There's so much to talk about here. And I actually gave a talk on this at the North Carolina State Show where I saw you guys. And it's so interesting because I was talking to like a room full of site managers and then like single facility owners who hadn't changed their rates in like 5 years. And then some of the most sophisticated revenue management teams in the industry, and trying to have a conversation about this with all three of those people at the same time is really difficult. Right. But
there's no lukewarm.
Right. Yeah. You kind of gotta decide on your strategy and then nerd out on it. But I think, taking street rates first, for standard rates for available units that you want to get a renter into. There's just as much art as there is science to setting rates. I think largely today, kind of the most sophisticated approaches that we see most operators taking is that they go out and they get a bunch of data about as much data as they can get their hands on about what street rates are out there, what are people doing in my competitive set in my market. And then they take their internal occupancy, move in, move out activity, and they kind of layer that on, and they say, okay, I'm going to kind of like base my rate on what my competitors are doing and then adjust it for what my goals are from an occupancy and leasing velocity perspective are.
And most of this is manual today for a lot of operators.
Some operators do it manually. They call around and they keep a spreadsheet, or they've been keeping a spreadsheet for 10 years and it's turned into a pretty sweet kind of algorithmic spreadsheet that they can actually do some pretty sophisticated things with. But then, the larger operators are running, a proper revenue management software that is bolted onto their FMS, and then, managing it that way, gathering the data that way. But all of them are basically trying to hit a bullseye. They are trying to decide what the real rate is. What is the market actually going to pay for that 10 by 10 climate controlled unit? And if I think it's $100, I need to do everything in my power to make sure that I nail it when I say, yes, this is $100. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that out there into the world. And then when a bunch of people move in, I'm going to say, look how smart I am. Look what I did. I said it was $100. We got a bunch of move-ins. I'm the smartest guy on the planet. And then when nobody moves in, they say, the market's tough. It's just soft right now. I think there's a world in the future where a little bit more gradient is introduced and you don't have to be so confident. And this is a technology problem. Extra Space today will publish like 10 landing pages sometimes for the same unit. And they'll show 10 different rates on that. And then the signal that they get about people clicking through and how many rentals that they get will inform what they actually believe the rate is. So if they think it's $100, they say, we're comfortable between 90 and 110. And we're going to use the activity that we can find over the phone, online, whatever, to get a little bit more confidence that maybe it's actually 105. We don't know for sure, but we feel better about 105. So now we're going to move our gradient of rates from 100 to 115, and then keep on repeating that experiment over and over and over in real time, and just follow the market where it's taking you as opposed to predicting where it's going to be. I think that's a technology problem that we're interested in, and I think can help the industry. There's some data constraints if you're a small operator, like it takes a long time to run A/B tests on 80 units, but that's something like that's a thing that technology can help with for sure.
It's super interesting. We could probably spend, the next 6 hours talking about just setting a price, right? Because most of this stuff is using historical regression analysis to try to do that. Hey, I'm spot on this price that's going on. Maybe they're adding in some futures analysis on top of it, but for the most part, my understanding of these things is it's not dynamic to the person. And I think that's where some of this stuff gets even more interesting, right? It's can I charge Matt something more than I charge Rodolfo for one reason or another? And how do we do that, right? Or, we know Rodolfo doesn't need a promotion right now to click through and finish his rental, but Matt does. How do we start to personalize that?
I was about to say the same thing on that end with promotions and discounts, right? To your point, Mason, about being dynamic, you could also, how do you find from, Cubby yourself, you have all that information, right? Of what's moving, what's not. How can you better serve maybe a promotion to push the ball for occupancy rates at one of the stores? I'm assuming there's a lot of experimentation that's happening behind the scenes for these different variables that make up revenue management.
Another thing I don't see people talking about in revenue management really is fees, which is kind of a dirty word. It's a double-edged sword. You can make a lot of money if you charge a bunch of fees, and you can also really kill your conversion if you surprise people with a bunch of fees at checkout.
Your admin
online.
fee, your technology fee, your use the bathroom fee, all the different fees that just stack up.
Yeah. I think we've even heard folks that charge a fee to call in and be able to talk to somebody.
Yeah. I know. I met an operator who was concerned about their Twilio expenses. So they were trying not to pick up the phone when their customers called. I was like, that's something, there's something broken, or just trying to get their people to hang up quickly, we got to fix that problem.
We're focusing on the wrong KPI here, guys. The wrong KPI.
Anything else on that? I think there's another world of ECRIs. This is a world that I don't have a strong opinion on. And I don't get real conviction about what's happening in the market with ECRIs right now, with the REITs. Everybody likes to talk about it. I don't get real conviction about how your average operator should handle the current market. I haven't heard a super compelling case one way or the other. So that's like, I'm really interested to see how that plays out. We're constantly digging in to figure out what we should be helping operators optimize for there. Our kind of modus operandi right now is just like, let's build the tech that allows them to run their strategy. We don't want to set rates for our clients at Cubby. We just want to give them the tech that allows them to run their strategy. And it'll be really interesting to see where that world goes. But that's another big theme that we talk about in revenue management. So
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we're not nearly as close to the revenue as you guys are from like hey, you're actually setting prices and taking payments in Cubby. But obviously we get to have a lot of conversations around like how we display pricing and everything. And then we're at all the different trade shows and ECRIs have been like such a topic of conversation in 2024. Probably because of the market, right? I feel like the market's coming back up, but I think probably because the market, it feels like a lot of operators are just looking to the REITs and going, they obviously know the answer. They have the answer. And so we have to go do the thing that they're doing, where the REITs are really just throwing spaghetti against the wall in a much more sophisticated way too, right? Like they're trying all this stuff to try to, increase their NOI, make the public markets happy with what they're doing. But at the end of the day, like it really is an experimentation period for them as well too, I think, right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. They also just have built-in advantage in that if they drop their rate $1, it has a bigger impact on their occupancy than it would for any other smaller operator. And that's just a benefit of scale that they have. So if you want to race them to the bottom, you're going to lose. They'll beat you.
Right. Because they have the nationwide 1,400 location footprint.
Right. So I think that's that's why I'm in tech and not storage. I love the business. I've got plenty of exposure through this company. I don't know how to manage that if you're an operator, but there's definitely tech you need to kind of like enable whatever strategy you're going to run. That's what we're building.
That's awesome. I'm curious to like transition from the revenue back to marketing a little bit. Obviously marketing, whether it be Google Ads strategy or website optimization is going to actually impact your revenue. You have a really bad website, it's not going to convert, right? Like, how do you think about that landscape of like marketing impacting conversion?
The first thing that I notice about storage coming from outside the industry, even compared to other asset classes like office and stuff, it's like, and I understand that a lot of these companies are smaller. They have, maybe 1, 2, 3 accountants, depending on how many facilities they're running. They have, an acquisitions guy, they have an operations guy and site managers, call center agents, but a lot of them don't even have a marketing person at all. And they view it as something that they need to find the right guy to dump it on so he can take care of it for them. And that's just never going to work. Maybe you can find there's great partners out there who do great work, right? Marketing agencies, people who can manage your SEO, people who can manage your ad spend online. But to not take ownership over your marketing it's just not a good strategy in my opinion. And we see it. You can see if you just divvy up the folks that have like taken ownership over their marketing internally or day to day through heavy interaction with their vendors, they outperform the ones who don't on a dollar per square foot basis. And so I think that's number one, is just like take ownership over your marketing.
Like have an opinion about what your personality and your brand is going to be, basically.
Yeah, and know how many users are hitting your website. How many phone calls are you getting from different channels? This stuff is totally within your control. You can stand up some of these changes in a very short period of time. So that's number one. For the more sophisticated operators, that's not the case. Obviously, they have marketing teams that are great. So we have responded to what we've heard in the market, which is this is a bottom of funnel focused market. Conversion is way more important for us because it's a need based, purchase than brand awareness or anything like that. I think I heard that like 70% of renters don't even know the name of the facility that they're renting at. They're
That's
like,
wild.
it's the orange one,
That's wild.
Green. Yeah.
This is why you need to make the logo bigger, right?
It all comes back. It all comes back.
Yeah. You need to make the logo bigger. That's the problem.
We solved it, guys.
But so if that's true, which I believe it is, then a lot of effort needs to go to the bottom of the funnel and making sure that the demand that you have access to is converting. So we think about it as like an e-commerce experience where we're doing everything in our power to help our operators get that existing demand from usually Google to move in. And there's a lot of different things you can do throughout that journey. And usually that has a lot to do with websites. It has a lot to do with following up with leads too, from over the phone and those kinds of things. So we take an e-commerce approach, like how many users are hitting your website, what sources are they coming from, how much did you spend to get them there from each of those sources, isolating that data, and then measuring it by cohort as who comes through and how are they dropping off, and throughout the process of renting a unit, and then doing everything in our power to make sure that we're fewer and fewer of those folks are dropping off. So we spent a ton of time on like the checkout, the payment methods, the simple little nooks and crannies that if you were running like a Shopify business, you'd be really tuned into. So we spend a lot of time on that. And then, the call center / site manager picking up the phone and automating everything that we can to make sure that that lead is converted. That's where we're focused from a marketing perspective. I think most of the industry is kind of starting to wake up to this. I don't think this is rocket science or something super novel to Cubby. I think we just do a good job of it, but we've got a longer way to go here, right? Like, if you abandon your cart when you're renting a unit at like Extra Space or Public Storage, you're getting a Facebook ad the next time you log on to Facebook or Instagram or whatever. There's good retargeting. It's easy for them to do that. None of that stuff is available to most of the market right now, and it works. If you paid some money to get somebody to your checkout and they abandon that cart, that's like at least $1,800 walking out the door. Do everything you can to get that person back. That's where we're focused. I think most of the industry is kind of has woken up to that, how important those concepts are, and are taking steps to address them for sure.
Yeah, the first one is as easy as like copying Amazon, like single click to purchase, and the thing shows up in 2 days, right? Like single click to purchase. How do you make that checkout process as seamless as possible? Obviously in storage, you're signing a lease, so you need to get like, ID and a lease signed, et cetera. But, how do you simplify that down to as few clicks as possible to get somebody putting stuff into 3 walls and a door?
We don't even make them sign a lease. We take the payment, we get you locked in, and then you follow up with like a post-purchase flow that ensures that they are compliant before move-in. And they don't get their gate code or a unit number or anything like that until they've checked all the boxes. But we've done a lot to kind of make sure that we're capturing that payment, because that's when you want a customer.
Yeah, you've got commitment now. Somebody took their wallet out and paid you, and the rest of it, it's like, okay, we can figure out how to get an e-signature on a document and an ID uploaded into a database somewhere.
Totally.
I love hearing this, because it's kind of going back to the very beginning of the conversation whenever you were talking about like how in general software vendors and how you guys are so focused on the product. Seems like you've essentially have created a culture of constant experimentation. So, you just explaining this, I know for certain that there's other platforms out there that do things differently. So I'm just curious to touch on that, like from getting inspiration from other industries and playbooks that you can learn from that and apply in self storage and kind of how you're doing things differently. How have you guys ensure that you continue to experiment? And some of this does seem like to you might not seem novel, but for me, not being in that world on a day to day, it's cool to hear about. How are you guys like essentially continue to experiment and make sure like, hey, this is working, or no, this isn't work. This isn't working. We need to go a different direction.
I'll be totally honest with you. We have some good opinions. We vet them, and as long as the engineering is sound, like the way we build something is not going to be too flimsy. It's going to be easy to maintain and update moving forward. We'll just do it, and we'll release it. And if we hear customers whining about the experience, then we know we need to keep going deeper. And we make sure that we have the time and space to spend with those customers to continue to go deeper, until we kind of like finish the swing, so to speak. Software is never done, but until an outcome is achieved for the business in a way that's really simple for, we have literally, she's 90 years old. She's a great grandma, Ruby. She's kind of like our power user in Monroe, Louisiana. If Miss Ruby can do it, anybody can do it. That's kind of like our internal test. She's so we design sophisticated software that a 90-year-old site manager and bookkeeper in Monroe, Louisiana can ace. And it doesn't happen on day one when we release a new feature, but we'll keep refining it until we get to that part. I'd love to do more experimentation in the future, and be like more of a, apply some of the concepts of like A/B testing internally to how we build product. But you know what? We're 30 people, we're a startup, and we got a lot to do. So until we have that luxury, it's kind of just all hands on deck and listen to our customers.
My favorite quote: "The greatest entrepreneurs know how to let fires burn." It's like there's a lot of fires happening, kind of all over the place. You got to pick the ones that you're going to go and solve.
Totally. We just implemented a system where we have like automated invoicing. I've been sending out manual invoices for every single customer and every single unit we have on the platform. It was a fire that was burning for a long time, but there was more important things to do.
I love that. Trust me.
I did not love it. It was painful.
I feel that pain very, very innately.
What about you guys? It seems like a very exciting time to be at Swivel. How do you think about building product, and where you're going to take Swivel? I know we've got some like potential plans to collaborate in the near future here.
Well, we got it on record. Hell yeah.
Oh yeah. No, let's do it.
Yeah, no, we're excited to partner with Cubby and obviously let the Swivel and Cubby worlds collide into building something really, really crazy cool together. Yeah, I mean, I think we also are a very product led company, and I think we're at a stage in our growth where I can speak for Rodolfo, Kyle, and myself that like we feel very humbled and grateful that we have a lot of amazing customers that pull us in the direction that we are headed in right now. When we first got into the industry, an example is like when we first got into the industry, we never really thought about reputation management and review solicitation, and customers pulled us into that. And then we saw, oh man, like there's a lot we can do just throughout the entire customer life cycle, right? So that led us into referral solicitation, and how do we correlate that referral into the facility management system so that you're applying whatever that discount was, right? Like these are all
Mhm.
customer led features that we went out and built in partnership with somebody. 2025 is going to be a really fun year for us because we have a lot of customers that are really passionate about our product. You talk about cutting cost or figuring out ways to like lower cost. I think, you know, we're going after like how do we answer the call? How do we make that outbound phone call without needing another human there, and then get the human involved when necessary? It's always been the core of our product is the humans in the loop whenever you want it to be, and it's out of the loop whenever you want it to be. And there's a lot of different things that we can go and attack from that perspective in the next year.
Cool. Yeah. And I know exactly what you're referring to from like just a need perspective. And it sounds awesome.
Yeah, we're excited about it. Like I said, a lot of customers we get asked about customer advisory boards all the time. It's probably a whole nother hour-long podcast and whatnot, but it's like, I feel like we get to talk. I love it. It's the best part of my job is getting to talk to our customers. Whether that's
Do you guys have a customer advisory board?
Not anything that's official. I think all of our customers are advisors.
That's
right?
what I was going to say. Yeah. Yeah. You don't put out you don't rent a Marriott ballroom and or meeting room and put out some bagels.
No, not today.
Okay.
I think this is another one of those the industry's used to how technology operators have operated in the past, and they're probably not used to technology operators that actually listen and execute against a roadmap and a strategy. And so, we're constantly asking for feedback. Every time that we have a touch point with a customer, it's an opportunity to get feedback. And I always say that feedback, good feedback, a pat on the back is amazing. It feels really good, but critical feedback that's going to make us better is the best kind of feedback.
Yeah.
And I think we get that in groves because our customers care. And so, that to us is our customer advisory board. We want to be available and listen and hear the pains of an operator. Sometimes the response from us is, I can't solve that for you, because that's not who we are, but we really are grateful that we were able to sit in the room with you and hear the problem, right?
Yeah, totally. We're the same way. And if anybody ever says, yes, we can solve every single problem for you, run in the other direction, basically. It's not possible.
But I think it's important for within these conversations, it's also we touch on having a great product, but it's also having great service and reliable team. Because at the end of the day, you walk into that room or into that Zoom meeting or whatnot, and you're also selling yourself, right? Against your competitors. Stuff happens to software every day, right? Might be a bug, it gets fixed quickly. This is awesome. But at the end of the day, you're also selling yourself and hey, if something does go wrong, you have my phone number and we'll get it sorted out and we'll get it fixed quickly. It's not like it's going to be in a ticket queue for weeks on end.
Totally.
So I think at this stage that we're at, and we try to distill that into as we hire and continue to hire more and more people, that mentality.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's the pod.
Yeah, Matt, this was a lot of fun, man. We appreciate you joining us and jumping in. Hearing your background's been fun to hear. Getting to dive into areas that we don't touch all the time, revenue management specifically. Really grateful for you spending the time with us, man.
Anytime, guys.
And so, as always, thanks for listening. If you have questions or comments or concerns, or you want to be a caller, we'll have you on the podcast. But reach out, let us know. You can always find more information at selfstoragelab.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.